You have all committed, as you all know, to transition the emissions from lending and investment activities to align with pathways to net zero in 2050. Do you know what the International Energy Agency has said is required to meet our global 2050 net zero targets of limiting global temperature rise to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.5 degrees Celsius? So no new fossil fuel production starting today. That's like zero. So I would like to ask all of you and go down the list, because again, you all have agreed to doing this. Please answer with a simple yes or no. Does your bank have a policy against funding new oil and gas products? Mr. Diamond.
Absolutely not, and that would be the road to hell for America.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Sir, you know what? Everybody that got relief from student loans has a bank account with your bank should probably take out their account and close their account. The fact that you're not even there to help relieve many of the folks that are in debt, extreme debt because of student loan debt, and you're out there criticizing it.
That sounded really unprofessional and a little unhinged. Welcome back to the program. Dana Lash here, your lovable curmudgeon. The nationally syndicated radio show, you can watch a simulcast on The First, YouTube, Facebook, elsewhere. That exchange, which happened just earlier this week between Rashida Tlaib and then Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, this was all about one of the things we've been hitting repeatedly for the past couple of years, this ESG, the environmental, social governance. It's sort of like CRT for energy and finance, and it's going to control everything. It's also kind of like China's behavioral credit score, but it's applicable to businesses, and they're using this to determine whether or not any of their partners, anything, if you're going to take out a loan, you're going to do any kind of work, do you meet these ESG guidelines? It is a way to control everything. This is one of the things you saw in Sri Lanka. You also saw this in the Netherlands with the protests. And one of, I think, the smartest people who talks on this issue, he himself is an energy expert, and you've seen him on television, Alex Epstein. He's the founder and CEO of the Center for Industrial Progress, and he's also the author of a new book, Fossil Future. Why global human flourishing requires more oil, coal, and natural gas, not less, which I would completely agree. Alex joins us now via Skype. Alex, congrats on the book. Thank you for joining us. And I have to say,
thank you.
I hope that people go and check out energytalkingpoints.com, because you also have a lot of stuff. If people are unfamiliar with what ESG is, you give a really good class on it in just a pretty short page. This has been growing for some time, but I feel like more and more we're noticing it now. What, for people who are unfamiliar with ESG, maybe people who are listening to us for the first time or meeting you for the first time, what is the most important thing that you would have them know about the impact of this, how it's going to affect them?
So the thing to know about ESG is it's posing as a set of universal norms that all businesses should follow. And it pretends that it has somehow discovered principles that will actually make businesses successful. But in fact, these are political guidelines basically emanating from the UN, and they are the opposite of success. So in the realm of social, they have a lot of what is really just racism, just telling you to prefer people based on, the hue of their skin, which is not a rational way to treat anything. In my realm in energy, it's the environmental category. And essentially what they mean by environmental is commit to rapidly eliminating fossil fuels as soon as possible, and also being hostile to nuclear, by the way, which is non-carbon. And it really points to, it's really a set of kind of far left political views, but being given as gospel to the management of companies. So it's taking these terrible political views that no one in America would vote for, and then it's trying to impose them in the boardroom. So it's very, very dangerous.
I was very glad to see and hear Jamie Dimon reply that way to that question. I mean, first off, you can't build a business that way, but that's just not how the world operates. I mean, Europe's on the verge of an energy crisis. I mean, they're starting it already as we move into winter. We're in the United States, we're looking at 2 and 3 times more going to be the cost to heat our homes. And yet we have fewer refineries. We have no rare earth element mines, nothing like that. Everything is ESG, which, as you said, affects not just fuel, but also farming, agriculture. I mentioned Sri Lanka. I also mentioned the Netherlands, the Dutch farmers. I mean, this is reducing yields in harvest. This is affecting agriculture as well.
I found Tlaib's statement very, very troubling in a couple ways. So one is she doesn't even know how to say Celsius. She says Celsius.
Crazy, yes.
But this is somebody who's saying she knows how the world needs to move. And then she was talking about this thing from the International Energy Agency. What she's referring to is something that talks about new investment in production. If you want to hit these goals, which I would say are deadly goals, but they say if you want to do this, you need to stop investment. But she said stop production. If you stop production, you need to produce fossil fuels constantly to have them. We don't just have them all stored for years. If you stop that, you would kill well over half the world very, very quickly, just of starvation, if you stop producing fossil fuels, which power all our agricultural equipment and give us a huge amount of our fertilizer. So this level of ignorance, and yet it has this confidence. She thinks she's a climate expert. She doesn't even know how to pronounce Celsius. So it's a scary kind of ignorance and power lust combined.
I had to actually think very hard about how she said that because it was Celsius. It's very difficult.
I know. I saw your face react to it.
Yeah, Celsius. That's something else. How ingrained is ESG at this point? Because I know it's and you were saying that this was something that originated with the UN. When you look at it, I just don't know how any sane person who can do basic math thinks that this is a feasible, sustainable thing to implement in any realm. Why is it though so prevalent, particularly in Europe, and now it's being introduced with little question here in the United States? What is selling this? Why are people buying into this?
Well, there's ESG in general, and then there's in energy, it's the fossil fuel elimination movement. And so with ESG in general, the activists have done a really, really good job of getting corporations to commit to it. And one of their main vehicles has been these index funds. You know, a lot of us, including me, invest in index funds, which are called passive investments. And so we allow BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street to aggregate all these investments. But in part because of the way the laws are set up and in part because of people's incentives, somebody like Larry Fink of BlackRock thereby controls the voting shares of, tens of millions of Americans. So his political views are basically being used to manipulate these corporations. So in 2020, he has a letter that says net zero, everyone needs to give a net zero commitment. He's called an emperor. We don't want an emperor in America, but and just to show his ignorance, kind of like Tlaib, not quite as bad. But he talked about China once in his letter, and it was to celebrate their net zero commitment, even though China, combined with India, has 200 plus coal plants in the pipeline. So it's this level of ignorance that's guiding everyone because of the way this is set up.
Oh my God. This is, I think, one of the most pressing issues. We're speaking with Alex Epstein, and he's the founder and CEO of the Center for Industrial Progress. His new book, Fossil Future, Why Global Human Flourishing Requires More Oil, Coal, and Natural Gas, Not Less. I mean, I don't mind progress in energy or new things in energy. I don't mind technology. I don't even have a problem with electric vehicles unless it's sold to me in the guise of being environmentally friendly, which it's not. With oil and gas so plentiful, and we've seen, I think it was Germany, maybe France as well, as this energy crisis has been hitting Europe, they're going back to coal. They've actually been warned by a number of these ESG beholden entities. You might not want to rely on coal so much. We had John Kerry telling the nations of Africa, don't rely on coal and fuel so much. Let's look at some more, let's look at greener alternatives. People don't have time to develop greener alternatives. In the United States, nothing has been put towards the infrastructure of rare earth elements or really any other exploration beyond, the wind turbines and giving wind turbines and giving everything to China. So what overall, in looking at this with ESG, how is this going to play out? Because I see some countries waking up, but it doesn't seem to be permanent. It seems temporary, and it seems to have all the momentum in the world behind it, and not enough strength here, at least domestically, to push back.
I think the basic facts are energy is crucial to life. 80% of the world's energy comes from fossil fuels. That's still growing despite all the opposition because they're so uniquely cost effective. Solar and wind are, less than 5% of the world's energy. They just provide electricity, which is most of our energy is not electricity. Yeah. And they're totally dependent on fossil fuels for their production, but also for their operation. They depend on fossil fueled reliable plants to handle their erratic nature. Most of the world doesn't have nearly enough energy. So we're talking about fossil fuels, 80% of the world's energy, when the world needs 2 to 4 times more energy as soon as it can get it to lift up the world. And we're talking about rapidly eliminating fossil fuels in the next 27 and a half years. This is a murder campaign in terms of the idea. And now if it succeeded, which it won't for practical reasons, it would, kill a large percentage of people on the earth. But what's really happening that scares me is, China, India, Russia aren't following along with this. But the US and Europe, the freer places on earth, we are sacrificing our own prosperity and our own security. And Europe should be a warning sign. But you see, Biden hasn't taken this at all because he just gave this speech and he said, basically, we're going to do more of what Europe. That's what it does. That's the Inflation Act. They call it the Inflation Reduction Act, but it's the Inflation Act, right? They're just copying Europe after Europe has been proven a total failure. So this anti-fossil fuel movement, they need to admit that they've caused an energy crisis. They need to reverse course and they need to embrace what I call a fossil future.
And we're talking with Alex Epstein. You said that there's a simple test to determine whether or not a candidate is truly supportive of American energy. And you said, very simple, ask if they oppose the Inflation Reduction Act, which it's not, because you say, and it is, one of the most destructive energy policies in American history. And if it's fully implemented, where does that leave us, the United States?
Yeah, right now it's law. And, the basic reason I say it's destructive, it's really whether they intended it or not, it's a 4-step recipe for destroying our energy. You think, what does it do? Number one is it makes us dependent on unreliable electricity. At the same time, it tells us to use more electricity. So that's where I live in California, right? Less electricity, more demand from EVs. How does that? We're already having problems. We only have 3% EVs. Then number two, they add new taxes to oil and gas, which is desperately needed around the world. They make it more costly. Then they give the EPA more power to shut down coal plants. We already have a huge threat of that, and they give environmental justice activists more ability to shut down projects. So this is totally devastating. It needs to be reversed, and the idea that we're celebrating this is crazy. The Republicans really, I'm not very political, but the Republicans need to get on top of this and really campaign on this is terrible. And they should also have an alternative, which if they go to my website, energytalkingpoints.com, should be energy freedom. They need a positive alternative, not just criticizing Democrats.
You should be talking with Kevin McCarthy. You shouldn't even be in California right now. You should be in D.C.
I am in D.C. right now, actually.
I see the Capitol behind it. You should be there right for as long as they need you. You should be in Kevin McCarthy's ear, Mitch McConnell's ear, and telling them what they need to do, because I agree with you. Their messaging and countering this has been horrific, and they're not being aggressive enough in engaging this. Alex Epstein, congrats on the book. The book is Fossil Future: Why Global Human Flourishing Requires More Oil, Coal, and Natural Gas, Not Less. I think you need to buy this book and read it if you want to know all of the stuff that you're going to be facing. And of course, energytalkingpoints.com. You have to check it out. Alex, thank you so much for what you do. You're a wealth of information, and I appreciate you following this so closely.
Thanks, Dana. Great to talk to you.
Good to talk with you. Thanks so much.